All right, welcome back to the deep dive, where we like to take a deep dive into the source material that you guys send us. And this time, we're going deep on bug-out locations,
Yeah.
BOLs. And
Carol.
we've got a pretty interesting set of sources for this one. We've got some articles that give us some specific BOL ideas. We have some articles that are focused on practical considerations. We even have a couple that you get into, the potential threats you might face.
Yeah, it really runs the gamut.
Yeah. So if you're totally new to this BOL concept, or even if you've got some experience on your belt, I think this deep dive is going to be for you. By the end of it, you should have a bunch of ideas for locations. But more importantly, you should have a solid framework for how to evaluate any spot.
Yeah.
And decide if it's right for you.
Yeah, it's about way more than just finding a dot on a map. It's about understanding why you would even need a BOL in the first place.
Right. What are the scenarios that we're talking about here?
Yeah.
Our sources really emphasize those what ifs.
Yeah.
What if a hurricane wipes out your town?
Yeah.
Or a pandemic makes it unsafe to stay put?
Right.
What if society breaks down and you got to get your family somewhere safe? That's where the BOL comes in.
Thinking back to Hurricane Katrina, that was a really stark reminder that even in a developed country, things can go south really quickly.
Yeah.
And those who had a prepared BOL probably fared much better.
Yeah, totally. And it's that peace of mind, right? It's having that backup generator in case the power goes out. You might not need it very often, but when you do, you're really glad you have it.
Exactly. So let's say you're convinced and you want to start looking for your perfect BOL. What should you be looking for? There's no one-size-fits-all answer. Our sources point to a few criteria that seem to come up again and again.
Okay, cool. So, accessibility's got to be a big one. It has to be reachable, right? And not just under, ideal conditions. One source suggests the half a tank of gas rule. Could you get there on half a tank?
Yeah,
even if, the roads are jammed or gas stations are closed, especially with your family in tow.
Yeah, and thinking about, the slowest member of your group,
Yeah.
could they make the journey? It's easy to picture yourself speeding off to your remote cabin. But the reality of bugging out, especially from, an urban environment, it can be very different. Traffic jams, roadblocks, even hostile encounters.
Right. And then what about resources? What good is a secluded spot if there's no water or food?
Yeah. Water is always number one. We've got articles here highlighting places known for natural water sources, like the Ozarks with their freshwater springs, the Dakotas National Grasslands with their access to rivers, even the Eastern Sierra's high desert has hidden streams, and you can collect rainwater there.
Wow. And that's just the beginning, right? Then you need to think about long-term sustenance. Can you grow food there? Is there wildlife to hunt and fish? Our sources really emphasize that. You're not just packing a weekend bag. You're prepping for potentially months, even years of self-sufficiency.
Which brings us to seclusion. You want to be off the grid, away from potential urban chaos and competition for resources.
Yeah, that makes sense. Our sources get pretty creative here. Abandoned mining towns in the Rockies, deserted islands in the Great Lakes, remote corners of national wildlife refuges. It's like something out of a survivalist movie.
I'm glad you brought up the movie comparison, because it's important to distinguish between, the romanticized version of prepping and the practical reality. While these secluded locations sound great in theory, there are also potential downsides. For instance, are there legal restrictions on staying in these locations long term? Even if it's legal, what about competition from other preppers who might have had the same idea?
Right. So it's not enough to just find a hidden spot. You also need to think about who else might know about it and what their intentions might be. And speaking of potential threats, we can't forget about defensibility.
Absolutely. The terrain of your BOL plays a huge role here. Think about natural barriers, like the ruggedness of the Ozarks, or the vantage points offered by the Rocky Mountains. These features can give you a tactical advantage in a dangerous situation.
Some of our sources even mention, the dense mangrove forests of Florida's coast as a natural barrier. But it's not just about human threats, is it? If you're holed up in a cave in the Black Hills, you're sharing that territory with bears and mountain lions. I don't think a fence is going to stop them.
Right. You really have to understand the flora and fauna of your chosen location. You need to know what kind of wildlife you're dealing with, how to coexist with them, or defend yourself if necessary. Because, let's be honest, a BOL isn't just about hunkering down. It's about thriving long term. And that means adapting to your environment, whatever it throws at you.
So, we've talked about accessibility, resources, seclusion, and defensibility. Those seem like the classic BOL criteria. But Our sources also suggest thinking outside the box a little bit. They mention some pretty unconventional options like abandoned fire lookout towers.
Which is a great example of a location that offers both, a high vantage point and a ready-made shelter. Imagine the views, the ability to, see potential threats from miles away.
You got me picturing myself in a lookout tower, scanning the horizon with binoculars. It's got a certain appeal, but could you really get there in a crisis? And what about long-term water and food?
Those are the kinds of questions you have to ask yourself. It's easy to get caught up in the romantic ideal, but you have to think through the practical implications. What works for one person might be a disaster for another.
Right. And speaking of unconventional, some sources even suggest, RVs or sailboats as potential BOLs.
Yeah, mobile options. They offer the ultimate freedom to move, but they come with their own set of challenges. For starters, you need specialized skills to operate and maintain them. And they can be vulnerable to breakdowns or attack.
Plus, you're limited by space. You can't pack a year's worth of supplies into an RV. You got to be really selective.
Yeah.
So, and then there's the urban safe house option. This is for the folks who don't want to escape to the wilderness, but they still want a safe haven. Maybe you've got family or a network of friends in a less densely populated area. Or maybe you've got secure apartment building with a group of like-minded preppers.
Remember, you're trading off proximity to danger with that urban BOL. You're still reliant on urban infrastructure, which should be unreliable in a crisis.
As you can see, there are a lot of options when it comes to choosing a BOL, and we've only scratched the surface. But before we get too excited about stocking our bug-out bags, I think we need to have a little reality check.
Yeah, this is where we transition from the theoretical to the practical.
I can see your eyes lighting up, you're getting into it now.
I am.
So, what are some of the key points from our sources when it comes to this, reality check mindset?
Well, distance and money are the two biggest filters. Can you afford your dream BOL? And can you realistically reach it in a crisis, especially with your family?
Right, and like we were talking about before,
yeah.
Physical fitness is key, not just for you, but for everyone in your group. A bug out is not a leisurely stroll. It can involve long distances, harsh conditions, unexpected obstacles. And even if you make it to your BOL, what then? That's when those survival skills and knowledge really come into play.
Living off the land is not a vacation. It takes practical skills like hunting, foraging, gardening, first aid. The list goes on.
It's not just about finding the perfect location. It's about preparing yourself, mentally and physically, for the realities of self-reliance.
Precisely. And while having a dedicated BOL is the ideal scenario, it's not feasible for everyone, but that doesn't mean you can't take steps to prepare.
Okay, so what are those steps? What are the essential supplies that come up in our sources?
Well, water purification is at the top of the list. You can't survive without clean water, so you'll need filters, purifiers, or other methods of making water safe.
And of course, food. Lots of non-perishable food, like canned goods, dried fruits, grains, enough to last you a while.
And a comprehensive first aid kit is also essential. You need to be prepared to handle injuries and illnesses on your own.
Right.
Yeah.
What about tools? I imagine you'd need a pretty good toolkit for repairs and building. And what about security measures?
Yeah. Tools and security are critical. And one source even suggests exploring reciprocity arrangements with friends or family.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Maybe you can't afford that secluded cabin in the woods, but maybe you've got a friend with some property in a more rural area who'd be willing to let you bug out there, in exchange for helping them prep or something.
It's a great example of community-based prepping, and it highlights the fact that you don't have to go it alone. There's strength in numbers. And sometimes pooling your resources and knowledge can make all the difference.
So whether you're aiming for a dedicated BOL or just trying to enhance your overall preparedness, I think there's a lot to take away from this deep dive. But we've covered a lot of ground already. I think it's time for a break.
Agreed. We've laid a good foundation, but there's so much more to explore.
When we come back, we'll delve into some specific locations in more detail, and we'll start digging into those prepping essentials. That can help you feel more prepared no matter where you are. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we laid out some of the key criteria for choosing a bug out location that I'm itching to get into some specifics now. Our sources mentioned a bunch of different locations, and I'm curious to hear your take on them.
Yeah, happy to delve into the details. And remember, it's not just about naming places. It's about giving you the tools to assess any location through that prepper lens.
Right. So let's get specific. What are some of the standout locations that pop up in our sources?
Well, the Appalachian Mountains are a classic choice. They stretch all the way from Georgia to Maine, offering that combination of rugged terrain, dense forests, and abundant natural resources that many preppers find appealing.
Yeah, it's like the quintessential prepper hideaway, right? I can practically picture a log cabin nestled in the woods, smoke curling from the chimney, a garden out back. Did the Appalachians really live up to the hype?
Well, they certainly have a lot to offer. There's a wealth of freshwater sources in the Appalachians, from rivers to springs. And the soil is generally fertile, which is great for gardening. Plus, there's plenty of wildlife for hunting and fishing, so you could potentially sustain yourself off the land.
Those mountains themselves provide a natural barrier, making it harder for outsiders to reach you. That's got to be a major plus in a bug-out scenario.
Absolutely. Another region that comes up frequently is the Ozarks, spanning Missouri and Arkansas. Similar to the Appalachians, the Ozarks offer seclusion and resources, but with their own unique characteristics.
I've heard the Ozarks have some of the purest spring water in the country. That alone makes them worth considering.
It does. Access to clean, fresh water is non-negotiable, and the Ozarks have that in spades. Plus, the region has a long history of homesteading and self-reliance, so you might even find existing structures or communities that align with a prepper mindset.
Oh, interesting. That sense of community, that could be a huge advantage, especially if you're bugging out with a family.
Right. Now, if you're truly seeking remoteness and low population density, northern Idaho and western Montana are worth exploring.
Oh, that's definitely a region that gets romanticized in prepper circles. Vast forests, towering mountains, pristine lakes. It sounds almost idyllic.
It certainly has its appeal, and fewer people mean less competition for resources, which is a major consideration in a bug-out scenario.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, I've heard the hunting and fishing opportunities in that region are phenomenal. You'd have your pick of elk, deer, trout. It's like a true wilderness pantry.
You've done your research, but let's not forget about those who might prefer a slightly milder climate.
Okay, good point. Not everyone wants to, brave freezing winters or contend with, harsh desert conditions.
Yeah, for those folks. The rural parts of Texas Hill Country might be a good fit. It offers rolling hills, rivers, and even some desert landscapes, so you get a bit of variety.
And Texas is known for its, wide open spaces and relatively affordable land, which could be appealing for those looking to establish a more permanent homestead.
Plus, the Hill Country has a surprisingly diverse ecosystem, so you have options for hunting, foraging, and even some small-scale agriculture.
Okay. This next one might surprise some listeners. But one of our sources actually recommends the high desert regions of the Southwest as a potential BOL. I gotta admit, I'm skeptical about this one. The desert just seems so harsh and unforgiving.
I understand that initial reaction, but it's all about perspective. While the desert presents its own challenges, it also offers some unique advantages for those who are prepared.
Okay, like what? I'm struggling to see the upside here.
Well, for one, the low visibility can work in your favor. It's hard for anyone to sneak up on you when there are miles of open desert in every direction.
Yeah, that's true. You'd have a clear view of any approaching threats.
And the lack of dense vegetation can make it easier to spot those threats from a distance. Plus, the desert gets a ton of sunshine, which makes solar power a viable option for off-grid energy.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal. But what about food and water? I thought the desert was, practically devoid of life.
That's a common misconception. The desert is teeming with life. You just have to know where to look. There are edible plants, medicinal herbs, and even some surprisingly adaptable wildlife that can provide sustenance.
So it's another case of challenging those preconceived notions and thinking outside the box. Who knows? Maybe the desert is a hidden gem for preppers.
It's certainly worth considering. Remember, the best BOL for you will depend on your individual circumstances and priorities. But regardless of the location you choose, there are certain principles of secrecy and security that are crucial to your success.
Okay, let's talk about secrecy. Why is it so important to keep your BOL under wraps? It seems a little, paranoid to be so secretive, doesn't it?
I understand why you might feel that way, but it's not about paranoia. It's about protecting yourself and your supplies in a potentially chaotic situation, in a crisis. Knowledge is power, and a well-stocked, secure BOL becomes a valuable asset. If too many people know about your location, you risk attracting unwanted attention.
So it's not just about keeping your prepper plans secret from your nosy neighbor. It's about protecting yourself from potential threats in a real crisis situation.
Exactly. And maintaining that secrecy involves a multifaceted approach.
Give us some practical tips. How can we ensure our BOL stays under the radar?
First and foremost, Be extremely discreet about who you share information with. Limit discussions about your BOL to your immediate family or a very small circle of trusted individuals.
That goes for online activity as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, no posting photos of your, like, prepper paradise on social media.
Absolutely. Be mindful of your digital footprint. Avoid searching for BOL-related terms or posting anything that could reveal your location. It's better to err on the side of caution.
Right. It's like we're secret agents protecting, like, classified information.
In a way, yes. You're protecting something valuable. Your safety and security in a crisis.
So we're being discreet about who we talk to. We're careful online. What else can we do?
When you're stalking your BOL, try to do it gradually and discreetly. No need to make a big show of loading up your truck with supplies in broad daylight.
Yeah. Fly under the radar.
Right.
Avoid unnecessary attention.
When it comes to travel, it's wise to consider using back roads or less traveled routes to minimize the chances of being observed.
So it's all about blending in, avoiding unnecessary attention.
Exactly. And once you're at your BOL, camouflage becomes your best friend. Use natural materials to conceal structures or vehicles, and be mindful of noise and light discipline.
So no blaring music or floodlights at night.
Right.
We're going for stealth mode.
Precisely. It's about minimizing your footprint and blending into your surroundings as much as possible.
Okay, so we've covered secrecy. Now let's talk about security. Like, what measures can we take to protect our BOL from potential threats? This is where it gets really interesting, right? We can get all tactical and MacGyver-ish.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend going full MacGyver.
Yeah.
But there are certainly options available, depending on your budget and skill level. But before we get into those, let's talk about some fundamental principles that apply across the board.
Okay, lay it on us. What are the, like, security essentials?
Well, the first is perimeter security. You want to create a buffer zone around your BOL, using natural barriers like rivers or cliffs, or man-made obstacles like fences or walls.
Okay, so think of it like a medieval castle with layers of defense.
Exactly. The next key element is surveillance. Early detection of potential threats is crucial.
So we're talking security cameras, motion sensors.
Those are certainly options. You can use high-tech solutions like that, or go low-tech with tripwires, or strategically placed mirrors.
Oh, tripwires. That sounds exciting.
It's all about using what you have available to create a system that alerts you to any intrusions. And, of course, we can't forget about good old-fashioned physical defenses.
Right. We might have all the latest gadgets, but sometimes nothing beats a solid wall and a strong door.
Absolutely. Having a plan for defending your BOL is essential. And this involves everything from fortifying structures to practicing defensive drills with your group.
So it's not just about building a fortress, it's about knowing how to use it effectively.
Exactly. And that brings us to a potentially sensitive topic, weapons.
Ah, yes. The big question, to arm or not to arm?
It's a personal decision, and one that should be made carefully, considering the legal implications and the potential risks.
Yeah, our sources seem to really emphasize, like, responsible storage and training. If you do choose to have firearms at your BOL.
Absolutely. Safety should always be the top priority, both for yourself and for those around you.
Okay, so let's say we've got our perimeter secured, we've got our surveillance system in place, our defensive strategies planned out, and we've made a responsible decision about firearms. What's next on the BOL checklist?
Well, now it's time to think about sustainability. Remember, a BOL is not just about surviving a short-term crisis. It's about creating a space where you can thrive long-term.
Right. We can't just be, like, hunkering down and eating canned beans forever. Yeah. We need a plan for, like, long-term survival and some level of comfort and well-being. So let's break down those sustainability essentials, starting with the most vital, water.
Absolutely. You need a reliable source of clean water, whether it's a well, a spring, a river, or even a rainwater collection system.
I'm guessing we can't just assume that any natural water source is safe to drink. We'll need a purification method as well.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You need a plan for purifying water, whether it's boiling, using filters, or chemical treatments. There are many options, each with its own pros and cons.
Okay, water is covered. What about food?
You want a multi-pronged approach here. Stocking up on non-perishable items like canned goods, dried fruits, and grains is a good starting point, but you should also consider establishing a garden to grow your own produce.
I've always wanted to have a huge garden. Fresh vegetables and herbs would be amazing in a BOL situation. And if you're in a location with abundant wildlife, hunting and fishing can provide a valuable source of protein.
Exactly. But remember, sustainability means managing those resources responsibly. Don't overhunt or overfish, And practice sustainable gardening techniques to ensure long-term food security.
It's about living in balance with your environment, not just exploiting it.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about energy.
Okay, are we going full pioneer mode, living by candlelight?
Well,
I gotta admit, I'm a bit of a tech junkie, so I'm hoping there are some off-grid power options available.
you're in luck. There are plenty of ways to generate power off-grid, including solar panels, wind turbines, and even small-scale hydroelectric generators, if you have access to running water.
Wow. So, we could potentially have lights, refrigeration, even internet access.
It's certainly possible, and a backup generator can provide peace of mind in case your renewable sources fail.
Okay, so we've got power, we've got food and water. What about waste management? It's not the most glamorous topic, but
Yeah,
it's essential for sanitation and hygiene.
you're right. We can't overlook this aspect. Composting is a great way to handle organic waste. And you can build a simple outhouse or composting toilet for human waste.
I've heard composting toilets can be surprisingly odor-free and effective. For gray water, which is the water from sinks and showers, you can create a simple system for diverting it away from your living spaces and using it to water plants.
It's all about minimizing your impact and creating a sustainable, healthy environment.
So, as you can see, creating a truly sustainable BOL is an ongoing process. It requires careful planning, adaptation, and a willingness to learn new skills.
But the rewards are well worth the effort. Imagine the sense of accomplishment and peace of mind. That comes from knowing you've created a space where you and your loved ones can not only survive, but thrive, no matter what challenges the world throws your way.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It's not just about like hunkering down and waiting for the storm to pass. It's about building a resilient life.
Yeah,
Even in the face of uncertainty.
exactly. And speaking of uncertainty, I think it's time we delve into the psychological and social aspects of prepping, because it's not just about the physical preparations, it's about preparing our minds and hearts for the challenges ahead.
That's a great point. We can have all the gear and supplies in the world, but if you're not like mentally and emotionally prepared, it won't be enough.
Right, and that's what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive. So, stay tuned, folks. We're about to get into the nitty-gritty of what it really means to be prepared. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've explored potential BOL locations. We dug into the practicalities of prepping. But now, it's time to tackle something just as important, like the human element.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the logistics of prepping, but we can't forget that we're not just preparing for, a theoretical event. We're preparing ourselves and our loved ones for a potentially life-altering experience.
Right. And our sources really emphasize this, the importance of mental and emotional preparedness. Makes sense, right? A bug-out situation, inherently stressful, unpredictable.
Absolutely. You're stepping outside your comfort zone, facing potential danger. Relying on skills and knowledge you might not have used in a long time, it can be overwhelming, even for the most seasoned prepper. So, it's not just about having the right gear, right? It's about having the right mindset. One of our sources uses this term, mental toughness. What does that even mean in the context of prepping?
Well, mental toughness is the ability to stay calm, focused, and decisive under pressure. It's about managing fear, controlling your emotions, and making rational decisions even when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed.
It sounds incredibly challenging, especially if you're in a life or death situation. So is that something that can be learned, or are some people just naturally better at handling stress than others?
Well, while some people might have a predisposition for resilience, mental toughness is a skill that can be cultivated like any other skill. And our sources highlight several techniques for developing it.
Okay, give us some practical tips for building mental toughness.
Visualization is one technique. This involves mentally rehearsing potential scenarios, playing out different possibilities in your mind.
So, if I imagine myself calmly handling a home invasion or navigating a chaotic evacuation, I'll be better equipped to handle those situations if they actually happen.
Exactly. By mentally preparing for those challenges, you reduce the shock and fear factor if and when they arise in real life. It's like practicing a fire drill.
Right. Another technique our sources mentioned is something called stress inoculation. Sounds a bit intimidating.
It's not as scary as it sounds. Stress inoculation involves gradually exposing yourself to manageable stressors, so you kind of build up a resilience over time.
So if I start taking cold showers now, I'll be better equipped to handle the challenges of a bug-out situation.
Well, maybe not cold shower specifically, but the principle is sound. It's about pushing your boundaries in a controlled environment so that when you face those real-world stressors, you're better able to adapt and cope.
Okay, so we're building our mental toughness, visualizing challenging scenarios, maybe even taking a few cold showers. What else should we be doing to, like, prepare ourselves psychologically?
Well, it's important to remember that you're probably not going to be bugging out alone. You'll likely be with family members or a group of like-minded individuals. And prepping as a group, both practically and psychologically, is a key theme that emerges from our sources.
It makes sense. Like, there's strength in numbers, right? Having people you trust around you can make a huge difference in a crisis.
Absolutely. Sharing the responsibility of prepping, supporting each other emotionally, working together towards a common goal. It can dramatically increase your chances of not just surviving, but thriving in a challenging situation.
One source even suggests, like, exploring the concept of, like, intentional communities or co-ops, where, like-minded individuals pool their resources and skills to create a more robust and sustainable, like, prepping network.
It's a fascinating idea. Imagine a community where everyone is on the same page when it comes to preparedness, where everyone has a role to play, a contribution to make.
Right. It's like a modern-day version of those, like, pioneer settlements.
Right.
But with a focus on, like, preparedness rather than just survival. I love that concept. But even with, like, a strong community and a resilient mindset, like maintaining morale in a long-term crisis situation, that's got to be tough.
You're right. Morale can make or break a group in a crisis, but our sources offer some valuable insights into how to cultivate and maintain a, like, positive and hopeful outlook, even in the face of adversity.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are the secrets to, like, keeping spirits high in a BO situation?
Well, one key factor is establishing a sense of purpose and meaning. It's easier to endure hardship when you feel like you're working towards something bigger than yourself.
So, like, it's about finding that why that drives you, that gives you a reason to, like, keep going, even when things get tough.
Exactly. Whether it's, the safety of your family, the well-being of your community, or even just the preservation of knowledge and skills for future generations. Having that sense of purpose can make all the difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else can we do?
Another crucial element is maintaining a sense of normalcy and routine, even in a drastically altered environment.
Even if, like, the world outside is chaotic, we should try to, like, stick to a schedule, have regular meals, engage in activities that bring us joy.
Precisely. It's about creating a sense of order and stability within your BOL, a sense that, like, life goes on, even in the face of disruption. And don't underestimate the power of connection and community.
Right. That's where that strong community comes in, like sharing meals, telling stories, playing games.
Exactly. These activities might seem trivial, but they foster a sense of belonging and shared experience, reminding us that we're not alone in this, that we're in it together.
It's not just about surviving, it's about living, right? Even in the face of adversity. Like, finding those moments of joy and connection can make all the difference.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And that's what prepping is truly about, isn't it? It's not about giving in to fear or despair. It's about taking control, being prepared, and creating a future where we can not only survive, but thrive, no matter what challenges come our way.
Well said. And that, my fellow knowledge seekers, brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of bug-out locations. We explored the practicalities of choosing a location, the importance of secrecy and security, the essentials of sustainability, and the often overlooked human element of prepping.
We've challenged some preconceived notions, hopefully sparked some inspiration, and most importantly, equipped you with the tools and knowledge you need to feel more prepared for whatever the future may hold.
Remember, prepping is a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous learning, adaptation, and connecting with others who share your values.
So, keep exploring, keep prepping, and keep diving deep into that vast ocean of knowledge that's out there.
Until next time, stay curious, stay prepared, and stay awesome.